Hello, I'm Martin Riley, and I'm joined today by Joel Parker, Everton fan, writer for Between the Posts, and founder of Toffee Analysis. Welcome back again, Joel. How are you doing, mate?
I'm very well. It's a pleasure to be back on. I feel like we're doing this at quite a nice time. I feel like last time, we was doing it first game of the season. Um, both of us not really sure what our teams were going to do, but I feel like we've met at this point of the season, both in relatively decent spirits. So I guess we'll take it going into January.
Yep, indeed. A lot has gone on since we last played each other. Obviously, it's the opening game of the season, wasn't it? So, a long time has passed. But how have things been for Everton since we last played you? Do you feel your position in the table will be fair after your results and performances?
I guess it's been a lot of inconsistencies. Just when you feel like you're out, feel like you've mentally checked out,
Yeah.
Everton like to pull you in. I feel like that's a lot of case in football teams, but with Everton in particular, it's definitely the case. And the season's really been summarised in the last few weeks. To be fair, um, we got comfortably beaten at home to Brentford. We had two players sent off against Wolves in incredibly stupid fashion. Um, got knocked out on penalties by Sunderland. You're thinking, yeah, this is it now. But then we rock up at Aston Villa and get 3 points out of the blue, which is not what you necessarily anticipate. But yeah, currently we're sitting in 10th, which I do think flatters us a little bit because we've conceded, or we should have conceded, a lot more goals than we have. I checked out
Okay.
Understat before we jumped on actually, and it currently has us on 33.8 XG conceded, which is
Yeah.
like nearly a 9 goal difference, which is pretty wild.
Mhm.
Um, but it's been a season of ups and downs. We've got rid of some big hoodoos this year. Um, Most notably that win against Manchester United, which, I mean, sure, everyone loves beating Manchester United, but we haven't won there for many many years, and did it in a also ridiculous fashion. But the Michael Keane Idrissa Gay incident, but also we went to Bournemouth, we went to Aston Villa, and we got wins there, and those are two teams that um, we hadn't beaten since they got promoted. So yeah, ups and downs in general.
No, that does make sense. And in some ways, there's been similar sort of themes to our season. You had a spell where you didn't do so well, but then you sort of picked up some form, and then a bit of inconsistency around that from what I can see from the results since we've played each other last. But that's all good. And going into the things a bit more detailed now, how have things been looking tactically under Moyes? Obviously, we're all aware what the type of football that he wants to play by now, but is it what you would expect to see from David Moyes?
Well, it is the classic Moyes formula.
Mhm.
The team's quite, when in possession, we are quite expansive, in the sense that, like, the fullbacks are sitting out wide, the wingers are acting, as you'd expect from a winger. Um, and yeah, it is. Don't get me wrong; it's still long balls towards Tiano Barry. Everyone is kind of expecting that kind of football under David Moyes. But I feel like within this formula, we have, I like to call it Grealish-ify. Maybe that doesn't roll very well, but but I feel like a big part of this season has been dictated by what he's doing on the left, and that kind of makes sense. You've got a winger there who's enjoys like a high volume of touches, and he's very very skilled at specifically like getting the ball towards the box or towards the final third. Um, and yeah, I feel like we had adapted to him quite well, although it did feel like we were stuck in like one motion sometimes. He would start making touches, and the game would slow down for us. The tempo would slow down, and suddenly the spaces are not necessarily there. Um, huge um, one huge reason for that as well would be Dewsbury Hall's injury. So when Grealish would have the ball, Dewsbury Hall is always the person like underlapping, and that was a really good access point for Everton. But his injury meant that that wasn't as accessible. And we're recording this on Wednesday, so yesterday's news at 5 p.m. Makes a very, very big difference towards Everton's season, which is Grealish is going to be out for what looks like a few months. So we're kind of going into this game not really knowing. I guess we, to a point, we know that it is going to be a long ball to Barry, but how is it going to participate on a shorter distance, if you know what I mean? So I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see what that who is going to be selected on the left. Um, Out of possession, it's also something that you would expect. There's still a big onus on the centre midfielders doing a bit more of the pressing as opposed to the wingers.
Mhm.
So what you would see a lot from Everton is usually Grealish and Iliman Ndiaye or whoever the selection is on the wings, tending to drop back, do a bit more man marking roles, but also cover the zone if needs be. While Idrissa Gueye would push up high. Um, could even be James Garner, could even be even Harrison Armstrong recently. Um, all in all, I think I still think some of the problems that we spoke about last time are still there in the case that them pressing high means that space opens up between the lines. And we've seen that a number of times where Everton have been played through quite comfortably, especially when we've played at home. We've had some like big defeats against like Brentford, Newcastle, Spurs, and they all kind of followed a similar pattern. But all in all, I think Moyes has stumbled on like more options than he thought he had in like the 8 to 10 kind of region, especially with like Armstrong coming back from Preston. Um, that's been a major detail the last few weeks. So yeah, same old thing with Moyes, but a few little tweaks here and there that make it a little bit different on the occasion.
That sounds like not about what I would expect. Little tweaks, but still the same Moyes formula that he's known for. So that does make sense. And has there been any tactical approaches from opposition that have caused you problems? I know you mentioned Brentford and being at home. So is there anything which teams are exploiting when you are at home, which has caused problems?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that really sets the tone of how the game is going to go has been when a team effectively counter presses us, um, especially when, say, that we're in circulation amongst the back line. The ball's going up to the fullback's moving it back to the centre back. On
Yeah.
that back pass, I feel like teams that can step up and jump up pretty effectively have had good games against Everton. Leeds is probably one of the better examples from that on the first game. You had uh, Dan James and Bogle who played that day, who just gave us no room to breathe whatsoever.
Okay.
And when the long ball was made towards Beto, you had guys like Ampadu and Stark drop in to retain the compactness around the striker, and it made things very difficult because like the tempos increased. We're not necessarily set in the type of long pass that we would want to make. So, it's things get a little bit more difficult when teams can press us well. That's something that Brentford also did very well. And as previously mentioned, a couple of the home games that we have had. But in possession, I think all in all, teams that tend to switch it up a little bit more out wide can put in good performances against us, especially with the amount of space that we can give fullbacks sometimes. I think a prime example of that, other than Leeds, you did have a very good game against us last time, but
Mhm.
the second half away to Sunderland, I think that was a real when I was going back on games in preparation for this is one that really stuck out in my mind, uh, especially with like Granit Xhaka starting to influence things in the middle of the field. So yeah, there's definitely ways to get at Everton, but that's, you know, when we speak about the Moyes style, that's something that that's the trials and tribulations of having someone like him as a coach. You know, you're not going to be possessing the ball for ages. You're going to be trying to move it quick via a long
Yeah.
pass, and yeah, it allows teams to come back to you as fast as you try and get it up there. So yeah,
Nope, that does make sense, and it is something that you can be guilty of sometimes when you do go more direct. You can very well be open to more direct stuff yourself, and this what you said there does fill me with some hope because we've gone a bit more direct than what we were last time against you. We've kind of had a bit of a switch up in our own style, and we've switched to the back three from most games, have a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2, and we do focus a lot of giving the ball to Calvert-Lewin aerially, and for him to bring it down and win second balls from there. So that kind of thing is what you should be expected to see from us. Not all the time. I wouldn't say
it's music to
we
my ears though. It's
is it
it involves DCL. Like in
true?
general,
Yeah,
that's anything involving Calvert Lewin is good fun. So I'm glad, to be honest. Like I'm glad that um, he's kept the fitness levels, because that is something that winding down his career at Everton, he continuously struggled to remain fit, or he would have a game. He'd
yeah,
have a spell where he would come back for like 3 or 4 games, and you wouldn't see him again for like another few weeks.
yeah,
And it's quite interesting, because when when we look back on the times that we were like nearly relegated, we had Richarlison and Calvert Lewin, which is like looking back on is generally quite a good striker partnership at the time.
hmm
And when you fast forward now, it feels like fans respect Richarlison a lot more than what they did Calvert Lewin, which I find a bit of a shame, because DCL had a massive impact. So he's a player that I'm really glad to see is doing well, is still in the Premier League, and still to really good effect.
yeah. He's been a revelation for us in recent months. Yeah, we're just very glad that he has kept his fitness and he's thriving because of that. I think he's a player who does need to get that sort of rhythm going, and that now he's got that rhythm, he's doing really well. So we do hope it does continue. But to get in a bit deeper into your squad, how do you feel your squad overall is looking? Is there any business that you think you're going to do in January now the window is open?
Well, the only players that we've been linked with really, really strike the Moyes tone, don't they? En Nazeri from Fenerbahce,
Yep.
the striker who's at Sevilla, and there's slight rumours. I mean, it's not going to happen, but there has been slight murmurs of interest in Romelu Lukaku, which I can't see, because I think Antonio Conte still values him as a really important player in that squad. Um, but yeah, even that, it feels like we're kind of looking in the wrong direction, really, because Tiano Barry, okay, he's not been scoring loads and loads of goals, but I feel like he's gradually grown into the season a little bit more, especially aerially. You know, this is a guy who can, a bit like Calvert Lewin, can move into different spaces and compete. And Barry's tendency is a little bit more to the right side. I think that's
hmm
more to do with the fact that Pickford's left-footed, so when the balls are going up the field, that's where Barry tends to be.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, it feels like we're kind of wasting our time looking for another striker, when I feel like there's other positions that do need attention. Most notably would be the fullbacks. For one, we've spent a lot of time with Mikalenko and Jack O'Brien, as our fullback pairing, which is pretty weird that you've got a guy who's like 6'7" playing at right back. Playing at right back. I know he can put in a decent cross sometimes, but even that hasn't been prevalent recently. And Mykolenko is someone who's not he doesn't really join in with the rotations as such with Grealish, which you think that if you've got a left back that likes to bomb forward, they could really benefit from having someone like Grealish on that side. So fullbacks in particular, that's one area that if you're Everton, I mean, I don't think we're going to be doing much business, if any, but that is one area in need that you think would need addressing. Even though Patterson has been getting a couple more minutes recently and has looked fairly solid since he's come back into the frame. In terms of injuries, I mean, Jared Branthwaite is still out. He's been out all season, which is a bit of a shame. Michael Keane is suspended again for this game, so I expect Patterson will keep his place at right back. And yeah, even though like the likes of Alcaraz and Dewsbury Hall and Tim Irabonum are still out, it feels like Moyes has got a midfield that he kind of prefers with like Merlin Rule and Armstrong, because those are guys that they feel like they could cover a lot of yards, but also get into different pockets of space when the ball is being turned over. So yeah, all in all, it's still a pretty top heavy squad when you look at it on paper, just by the amount of like talented number 10s slash forwards behind the striker that we have on a technical level. But yeah, I think that a lot of, if you'd ask like the average Everton supporter, they'd be pretty happy with at least a bulk of the players that are getting minutes for us.
Nope, that makes sense. And who would you say has been your key players this season, or the top three players where if these players were to have a bad game, it would likely mean a loss for Everton?
Well, the first is someone that I wouldn't have picked at like the when we first did our preview at the start of the season, and that's James Garner. I feel like his game has really elevated over the last 12 months. If there was a player that you could point out the differences between Sean Dyche and David Moyes, it's probably James Garner, just because I feel like he's got when we have the ball, I feel like he's got a little bit more freedom in the center of the field to maybe take up positions here or there, and it's good that we've got a midfielder that he feels like he could play the ball forwards a lot more consistently than some of the other guys that we've had. And we haven't really had that since like we sold Amadou Onana like a good few summers ago now. So yeah, he's definitely one. When you look at like all his underlying numbers in comparison to last season, they have massively gone up. So yeah, he's really a really important player. Another one's Jordan Pickford still,
Of
which I
course.
mean, you're picking, you're picking your goalkeeper as an important player. Maybe it's not, the best kind of sides, but look, it's Jordan Pickford. He's still a ridiculously good goalkeeper for us. And, once again, the fact that we've overperformed in our XG numbers is down to him. Still being making really big saves. Feels like he's done it again this year. Like Manchester United away is a good example. The one that he made against Wolves the other week, another one too. So yeah, Pickford is still massive. And the third player, I mean, it's hard to pick one who's going to play because Grealish is out, and Grealish would have been potentially the third pick, but I would have probably leaned more towards Dewsbury Hall because he's a guy that's quite versatile in the centre of the field, and he was on like a ridiculously good amount of form up until his injury against Chelsea, which is a big shame. But those three in particular, they feel like the most important three over the course of this season so far. So, yeah, Dewsbury Hall's expected back soonish. I think it's still a bit too early for this game, but the sooner he's back, the sooner that we can really start getting back into good levels in the attack again.
Nope, that makes sense, and I am a fan of Dewsbury Hall. I think he's a talented player and offers teams a lot, both in and out of possession. He's got really good pressing intelligence. I've found when I've watched him anyway. I'm not sure if that's something you've noticed from him, but I've really liked that part of his game. But speaking more about this particular matchup against Leeds, are you expecting to see any changes to your usual style of play against us?
Short answer, no,
Mhm.
because it's Moyes. But
Yeah,
but I feel like one of the tweaks that he may keep is Dwight McNeil starting on the right, and that is something that would give him a little bit more flexibility, I feel, in in how we act off the ball. For example, he played against Aston Villa and he was playing quite a strict man marking role on Buendia during that game.
yeah,
I feel like against Leeds, you can have him just like following Goodmunson, who I assume would play on Monday. You could, just have McNeil dropping back, and that supports the defensive line against the wing backs. Or alternatively, if Leeds wanted to potentially play like a box midfield with like two tens behind Calvert Lewin, McNeil's defensively disciplined enough to drop into pockets, and in turn, with like Barry, potentially Armstrong, and whoever's playing on the left, we could get into a bit more like man-to-man situations, which I feel like would benefit us. So yeah, that if once again, like I'm not expecting anything drastically wild in terms of like how we press or anything like that, but him starting on the right and maintaining his spot, I feel like that gives Everton a little bit more to play with in terms of how they set up in deeper situations. So that's something that I'm kind of anticipating.
okay, that's great. And the next question, best guess at the lineup. You mentioned a couple of players there in McNeil and the other players you mentioned earlier as well. So if you give us a best guess at what your lineup's going to look like for this one.
Well, I'm going to put a big asterisk on whether Ndiaye and Idrissa Gueye are going to come back from Senegal celebrations, which, to be fair, I wouldn't blame them. I wouldn't blame them
Yeah,
for staying there, but I am expecting them to be available, considering that obviously the AFCON final was on Sunday, and this game is being played like 8 days later. So
yeah.
um, my guess, Pickford in goal, uh, Patterson and Mikalenko as the fullbacks. I should imagine it's Jacob Breen and Tarkowski at centre back, considering our options are pretty limited in that area. Um, in the double pivot, probably Garner and Gay. That would be nice to see them two once again. Um, in the attack, expecting McNeil to start on the right. It could be Tyler Diblin, but I would be surprised. It's a bit of a shame because I think Diblin came in with like quite a lot of hype and momentum after like almost like basically playing a full season at Premier League level for Southampton. We signed him for big money, but he just hasn't had the minutes, unfortunately, and that is a shame. But I'm expecting McNeil to start on the right. I'm expecting Armstrong in the number 10 role, which, you know, considering this guy is like 18, 19, he looks like he's played in that role for years, which is quite ridiculous to say, but it's good to see like a young Everton academy product coming in and getting regular minutes. So expecting him there, and on the left, and I should imagine would be the Grealish replacement. It would be the first time that he's playing back on that left side since last season, and Tiano Barry up front is the more preferred choice to Beto as of late, which is quite understandable when you watch them out of possession, because Barry is quite strict, does make appropriate jumps, whilst Beto's a little bit more chaotic on that front. Like, I'm not denying that he works hard, but he works hard in the wrong areas, which I feel is quite horrible to say, because there's something quite likable about him, but out of possession, I think Barry's asserted himself as the starting striker for Everton, which is a good sign, because that had been Barry, a bit like Tyler Dibbling, was in that, you know, kind of grey zone of what does their long term future look like, and yeah, it's good to see that he's getting more minutes now.
Good stuff. And the final question I've got for you is, we don't ask for predictions on this podcast, but what I will ask is, where will this game be won or lost, in your opinion?
Well, games at the Hill Dickinson Stadium we have had a number of games that have followed the same kind of line, in which case the opposition come, they press really well, make us look uncomfortable, and then from that point it's kind of like things start to slide a little bit from our perspective. And even games against like Brighton and Crystal Palace, those are two games that we won, but we still conceded, like, I think over 2xG in both of those games. So I feel like if Leeds were to assert themselves like they did in the previous game, I think we would still have a number of issues. But I guess it kind of depends on how Moyes approaches Grealish, Grealish not starting, and where McNeil fits in potentially if he does play. So yeah, there's a question mark over. Well, it just, with Everton, you don't really know what we're currently gonna expect on that front. So yeah,
That's great. Thank you very much. And that's all I've got for you. So thank you again for joining us. It's been great having you back. Where can our listeners find your content, Joel?
Best point of reference would be on Twitter, or X as some people like to call it, which my username is @Jolapsol. And basically, for between the posts, I cover a lot of like top five games, a lot of tactical reports on them, and that's most like in the last 12 to 18 months has been more Serie A focused. So if that's your cup of tea, I'd like to see myself as someone who's a good point to call. But yeah, so check out that, and check out Between the Posts as well, because there are so many good writers on there that are doing great work every week. And yeah, come get your fill.
Sounds good, and I can highly recommend the content that they do put out. It's excellent, and yours as well in particular. I do enjoy reading, Joel. So that's
Very
great again.
appreciated.
No problem. Thanks again, and hope to see you next time.
Thanks for having us on.
Bye-bye.